In the grand architecture of British royal history, certain figures stand illuminated beneath chandeliers and coronation crowns, while others move through candlelit corridors, shaping events without ever claiming the throne. Among those quieter architects of influence was Alice Keppel, a woman whose life unfolded not in the rigid script of monarchy but in the subtle margins where affection, diplomacy, and social intelligence intertwined. Born Alice Frederica Edmonstone in 1808 into an established Scottish aristocratic family, she entered a world already structured by hierarchy and tradition. Her father, Sir William Edmonstone, 6th Baronet, ensured that she was raised within the expectations of refinement, discretion, and strategic social awareness. The late Victorian era into which she matured was one of rigid public morality, yet beneath its polished exterior ran a current of private arrangements, alliances, and carefully managed indiscretions. Alice learned early that survival within elite society required not rebellion, but calibration. She was not flamboyant, not aggressively ambitious, yet those who encountered her often sensed a magnetic steadiness, a calm intelligence that made others feel seen, heard, and valued. Her marriage in 1898 to George Keppel, the honorable son of the chief Earl of Albemarle, was respectable and socially advantageous. It secured her position within Britain's upper circles and granted her the freedom of movement expected of a well-placed aristocratic wife. But Victorian marriages among the elite were rarely fueled by romantic exclusivity. They were partnerships rooted in property, lineage, and mutual understanding. Both Alice and her husband navigated a society in which discreet affairs were tolerated so long as decorum remained intact. It was within this framework that her life intersected with the man who would define her historical legacy, Edward VII, then Prince of Wales. When they met around 1898, Edward was nearing 60, a seasoned figure accustomed to companionship and indulgence. He had waited decades as heir apparent under the long reign of Queen Victoria, and by the time he encountered Alice, he was both powerful and profoundly restless. What distinguished Alice from other women in his orbit was not drama or beauty alone, but composure. She offered him equilibrium. Where others stirred excitement, she provided relief. The relationship developed not as a reckless scandal, but as a steady companionship built on conversation, tact, and mutual respect. When Queen Victoria died in 1801 and Edward ascended the throne, the dynamic shifted yet endured. Alice did not vanish with his coronation. She adapted to the new reality. Now attached to a reigning monarch, she became a presence that ministers and courtiers recognized, even if they rarely acknowledged her openly. The Edwardian era that followed shimmered with opulence at glittering banquets, political gatherings, weekends at country estates, and within that social choreography, Alice functioned as a quiet stabilizer. She did not issue political instructions, nor did she publicly intervene in state affairs. Yet contemporaries noted her capacity to calm the king's temper and ease tensions during moments of strain. Access to her often meant access to the king's ear, not because she wielded overt authority, but because she understood him personally. In a monarchy that balanced constitutional limits with personal influence, emotional steadiness could translate into subtle political weight. Her influence was indirect but tangible, and she exercised it with remarkable restraint. Unlike earlier royal mistresses who had stirred jealousy or factional rivalry, Alice maintained discipline. She avoided theatrical displays, kept her discretion intact, and ensured that her presence did not destabilize the royal household. What makes Alice's story particularly compelling is not merely her proximity to power but the sophistication with which she navigated it. Edward VI's reign, though relatively short, marked a transition from the stern moralism of the Victorian age to a more cosmopolitan, socially fluid Edwardian period. Diplomacy during this time relied heavily on personal relationships and informal gatherings. The king himself traveled widely, cultivated foreign alliances, and embodied a sociable style of monarchy. Within that environment, Alice's temperament aligned perfectly. She was adept at conversation, capable of disarming intensity with warmth. She did not challenge his authority. She reinforced his confidence. Her presence reflected a broader reality of aristocratic life at the turn of the century, one in which private relationships often underpinned public stability. Even her husband, George Keppel, tolerated the arrangement, reportedly acknowledging that his wife's relationship with the king ensured social security for their family. It was an understanding rooted in pragmatism rather than romance, and it underscored the complex moral codes of their class. As the years passed, Edward aged, and the vigor that had defined his social dominance began to wane. Alice remained steady. When his health declined sharply in 1810, she was among those who visited him in his final days. After his death, Queen Alexandra requested that Alice leave the palace, a symbolic closing of a chapter that had quietly shaped her reign. With the accession of George V, the atmosphere of the monarchy shifted toward conservatism and distance. Alice's era of proximity to the throne had ended, yet she did not collapse into disgrace or obscurity. Instead, she adjusted once more, relocating frequently between England and Italy, investing in property, maintaining her social networks, and focusing on her daughter's futures. The world itself was transforming. The First World War would soon shatter the illusions of Edwardian elegance. The British Empire would begin to confront modern scrutiny. The age of quiet aristocratic indulgence would give way to mass media and public accountability. And yet, history has a curious way of folding back upon itself. One of Alice's daughters, Sonia Keppel, would become the grandmother of Camilla Parker Bowles, linking Alice's legacy to the future reign of Prince Charles. When Camilla's relationship with Charles became public decades later, observers could not resist drawing parallels. A great-grandmother who loved the king, a great-granddaughter who would one day marry one. The echo seemed almost poetic. Yet to interpret Alice's life merely as a prelude to repetition would diminish her individuality. She was not a template for scandal but a reflection of her own era's structures. She operated within a world that allowed certain freedoms under strict conditions. With discretion, she mastered those conditions. She understood that influence required patience, that affection could coexist with political awareness, and that survival in elite society demanded subtlety above all. Alice Keppel's legacy, therefore, rests not on sensationalism but on nuance. She demonstrated that women in constrained systems could still exercise agency, albeit indirectly. She did not campaign for reform, nor did she challenge the monarchy's foundations. Instead, she navigated its emotional currents. In an institution often defined by ceremony and hierarchy, she represented the human undercurrent, the conversations after formal dinner, the reassurance offered during moments of doubt, the companionship that softened the burdens of rule. When she died in 1947, the same year her great-granddaughter Camilla was born, the world had already shifted dramatically from the one she once inhabited. The British monarchy was evolving, facing a century that would expose it to unprecedented scrutiny. The quiet discretion that shielded Alice would not protect later generations. Yet her story persists because it reveals a truth often overshadowed by crowns and proclamations. History is shaped not only by sovereigns but by those who stand near them, steadying their hands and tempering their impulses. In the final measure, Alice Keppel was neither villain nor heroine, neither revolutionary nor victim. She was a product of aristocratic Britain at the turn of the 20th century, and within that framework she carved a role that balanced intimacy with prudence. She neither demanded power nor rejected proximity to it. Instead, she understood its rhythms. Her life reminds us that monarchies, for all their ceremony, are human institutions sustained by relationships as much as by law. And sometimes the most enduring echoes in history are not the loudest proclamations from the throne, but the quiet presence beside it.